And without a break, apologies, let's get to the last panel of the day before we conclude our event. And I think this panel has the most difficult mandate, because we can have all the ambitions in the world, but to get the job done, we need the tools. And how do we generate the tools to actually to realize our objectives? So to moderate this panel, we have Mr. Colin Robertson, Vice President of the Canadian Defence and Foreign Affairs Institute.
Thank you very much. I was given two injunctions on organizing this panel by the organizers. The first was to make sure that we ended on time so you got your break, and they have provided me a clock in front of me, so I shall ensure that you get out on time. And the second was not to be deadly. And with that in mind, I was reminded of, because we will get into things like procurement, a year ago at the CDAA conference, Lord Levine came, and I spoke to him after, and he recommended I read Norm Morgan's Augustine, and Augustine has written a number of laws, and I take this as part of my injunction for this panel. This is law number 48. The more time you spend talking about what you have been doing, the less time you have to spend doing what you have been talking about. Eventually, you spend more and more time talking about less and less, until finally, you spend all your time talking about nothing. Now, with that in mind, this is a panel that will not talk about nothing, because there's probably nothing more difficult in some ways than the whole issue of capability. And earlier this week, some of us were privileged to hear Philip Breedlove, General Breedlove, who Supreme Allied Commander Europe, and I thought as sort of a starting point, I would take his he posed a series of questions, and two of them were the following. Are we structured correctly to provide a rapid and credible response? The second question, is the alliance agile and flexible enough to react appropriately? So with that, I'm going to pass the microphone to Rennie and let him take this forward.
Thank you. First of all, I have to congratulate you, and just to congratulate you on the fact that you are the diehards who want to sit in to hear about capability development. Whether in the EU or NATO or for nations individually, the defense establishments have been facing similar challenges. And it is our role at the European Defence Agency to propose cooperative solutions between the member states and together with our partners to provide us with the capabilities that we need to tackle our 21st century defense and security challenges. Now, many of you will undoubtedly have heard people say that the state of European defense cooperation is in a bad state. I'm here today to show you, however, that the glass is not half empty, but that the glass is half full. I think we are on the right track, but nevertheless, it is important to know where we've come from, and indeed, the numbers do not lie. Because of a myriad of uncoordinated national programs, a lack of interoperability, different strategic interests, different national security interests, a fragmented defense and technological industrial base, we in Europe have made it possible to have right now 19 different types of armored fighting vehicles, 14 different types of main battle tanks, 16 types of fighter aircraft, 5 types of attack helicopters, and 29 different types of frigates. Whereas in the US and Canada together, there only exists a handful at most of every type of this equipment. And of course, we should not compare North America to the European Union in that way, because it's always been a different setup. But it's clear that in Europe we have a lot of catching up to do. The crisis in Libya, Mali, Central African Republic, and recently, or now in Ukraine, have proven how important it is for Europe to manage crisis situations in our own geostrategic neighborhood. But so far, Europe has lacked the strategic enablers to sustain the operations in the long term. And in plain English, that means that Libya and Mali, Europe depended too much on the US to keep its planes in the air, to identify targets on the ground, and also the necessary smart ammunition to engage. Now, what is to be done? And actually, it's not that difficult, Colin. It's very simple. And this morning, I think that Maciej Popowski already mentioned these three interdependent elements, because, of course, we need an enhanced CSDP, Common Security and Defense Policy. But a CSDP cannot exist without capabilities. And thirdly, capabilities can only exist because of the defense technological and industrial base. And these three are linked like communicating vessels. Well, for that, you also need a very competitive European defense industrial base. And that is where it's lacking because of former national policies, national strategic policies, security policies that we have not been able to get our act together. So an absolute prerequisite to attain results is political will. Or maybe I should take it one step further, sustained political commitment. And that is where the European Council at the end of last year came in. Because so far, that was a scarce commodity. We have the political will to move forward. And this morning already we discussed the outcome of the Council conclusions. And I cannot stress enough how unique and important the event was, because for the first time, the heads of state and government agreed on a short and a punchy phrase, defense matters. And secondly, even more important, this was not a one-stop shop event. It is something that will be assessed next year, again, by the heads of state and government. Although we have to admit a sense of urgency prevails. We first and foremost have the member states in the European Union, but also our allies, Canada and the United States, and also the various other European institutions and industry working together in a streamlined effort. For us, in the European Defence Agency, it is a member state-driven process, and it starts from an intergovernmental logic. We at the EDA, the European Defence Agency, are all about concrete actions and initiatives. We do not draft foreign and defence policy, no. We come up with concrete and tangible programs, and we focus on tangible outputs. And that is why we are so happy that the Council last year blessed these 4 major programs in the European Council. We were very successful in that. However, now the proof of the pudding is in the eating. We'll have to make it work. But we cannot afford to lose out. We have to deliver on air-to-air refueling, where we have to step up to the plate, on satellite communications, on remotely piloted air systems, and on cyber defense. Now, some of you may think, and it was already discussed this morning, well, but some of it that's done in NATO. Anything that we do within the European Union on these programs is done in full complementarity to NATO and non-duplicative, because all our member states, and 22 of our member states in the European Union are also member states, are also NATO allies. We cannot afford to have more than one single set of forces. We can only use them once, be it in EU operations, in NATO operations, in UN operations, it doesn't matter. So duplication is out of the question. And take the example of cyber, where NATO has a very big organization concentrating on cyber defense. We are concentrating on just a small part, cyber training and cyber defense, and very much in line with civil-military coordination. And that's an area where we in the European Union, of course, have a much better game to play than at NATO, because we have our allegiance to the European Commission. And if we talk about dual-use activities and satellite communications, remotely piloted air systems, and cyber are all 3 in the domain of dual use, where we not only can tap into the funds of the European Union, but also can make it work across the board, civil and military. Pooling and sharing, it was mentioned this morning, is a very important element of what we do. It's not about doing the same with less, or doing less together. So it's not an answer to our diminishing defense budgets, but at least it's the start of getting together to work in a cooperative fashion efficiently, not like we did, for instance, in a program like NH90, And I don't refer to NH90 because it was called a NATO program. But that program delivered over 25 different versions of a helicopter. We no longer can afford to do that. We have to come together in a more coordinated fashion to deliver a sound capability in a harmonized fashion. I said we need industry to deliver these capabilities. And industry is an integral part of our policies and practices, what we do in the European Union. Not only do we need to address the issues at the level of the OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers, but I'll leave to Pierre later on to discuss that. Also, the small and medium-sized enterprises are part of the whole supply chain of the European defense technological and industrial base. And we should not regard it as a European defense technological and industrial base. We should regard it as part of the global, a very competitive defense technological and industrial base. And Canadian industry is also part of that. Now, I'd like to leave you, before I give over, with our ambitions. Our ambitions are very, very high, as I told you, on the programs that we have to deliver on. But I have something to say more about ambitious people. I want to share with you a Canadian one, because we find ourselves in a building named after your country's 13th Prime Minister, Mr. John J. Diefenbaker. And allegedly, he once publicly stated, "I'm so excited about Canada ruling the world." Now, let us be ambitious together then. But in Europe, we still need to acquire some capabilities to get started. Thank you.
Rennie, thank you. Wendy, you've got the questions posed, to which Rennie's had another couple, the industrial base question and political will. Now, I'm not going to expect you to address the political will question, given your status as civil servant, but the industrial base, and as General Breedlove says, the agility of the alliance and our ability to respond.
Thank you very much. We're up here under very bright lights and it's a warm room, so if I look like I'm sweating, it's not simply because I'm here giving a presentation to you. It's a real pleasure to be here today, and thank you very much to the European Commission and to colleagues for having me on this panel, and to all of you for wading through the full scope of the session today. I gather it's been a very long and a very interesting day, so I'll try and keep my remarks fairly short, and then we can get on to what will probably be the interesting part, which is the discussion. I was asked to come here to talk today a little bit about the delivery of capabilities, and I am a representative. I am from the Materiel Group in the Department of National Defense, and I'm responsible for industry and international programs. And through that lens, I look at how we cooperate as the Department of National Defense and Canada with international colleagues in the delivery of Canadian Armed Forces capabilities. And it's an element that is very important to us. I'm sure you all realize, for all of my Canadian colleagues in the room who read the press, defense procurement and the delivery of capabilities is a very complex business. It is something that is necessary to have continuous improvement throughout. I think there is, and I forget who the quote was, but there is a quote somewhere that said that from the moment they created defense procurement organizations, they created the reform of defense procurement organizations, and we continue down that path today. We have a number of initiatives underway in Canada. We have first, the government in the speech from the throne last fall announced that it would embark upon a renewal of our strategic defense policy, the Canada First Defense Strategy, as well as we would have a new defense procurement strategy, one which the government announced in February of this year. These initiatives really serve to underline the Canadian government's commitment to a modern, multi-role, combat-capable armed forces, one which is positioned to operate here at home in Canada and also abroad. It's crucial that we get this right. Today, Canadian Armed Forces fighter aircraft are starting to operate in Romania to train alongside some NATO allies. Canadian Army is at the moment exercising in Poland. The Royal Canadian Navy is on its way to join our NATO allies in the Mediterranean. All of these are crucial capabilities available to the government to deliver an effect, which is, as the strategic situation continues to evolve, something which is very important. My organization, the Materiel Group, our mission is to deliver capability responsively. We have to deliver the requirements that Canadian Armed Forces have identified. In Canada, though, we have a complex and multi-department approach to procurement. What our American friends would describe as interagency, I think we describe it in various ways in Canada, not all of which are entirely polite on occasion. What is key, though, is that we each bring very specialist capabilities and very important value added to the process. The Canadian government has made a conscious decision over decades to separate ministerial accountabilities for the delivery of materiel and the management of defence materiel from the procurement authorities that then work collectively to ensure capability. We also have separate ministerial authorities for industrial benefits. In Canada, our Industrial Regional Benefits Program or our Offset Program. National Defence works hand in glove with our other government departments to manage the capability delivery process for the Canadian Forces. And one of the other things that we do, as I think I mentioned earlier, is that we work very closely with our allies and partners to make sure that whatever we are delivering is interoperable and that it's equipped to work alongside other forces. We are rarely, if ever, involved, certainly in an expeditionary operation or in support of international security, where we are not working right alongside our allies. I'll say just a few words, and I'm watching the clock count down. Colin's going to kick me when it's time for me to give up the mic. We have, I said, underway a Canada First Defence Strategy renewal. It is critical to us because what we've seen over the course of the last number of years is a fundamental shift in both the strategic landscape and our financial landscape. In 2008, when the Canada First Defence Strategy was announced, the Canadian Forces were in the midst of a period of the highest operational tempo we had been in many, many years. At the same time, the world was starting into what is seen to be a prolonged financial crisis. This has meant an absolute priority to ensure that our defence investment program is affordable and it's sustainable, and that we're able to deliver the capabilities that the Canadian government has asked of us. Right at the moment, our focus is on the adjustments that are necessary to position national defence to deliver the capabilities that the government is identifying. We, at the same time, have a real responsibility to be part of the government's commitment to balance the federal budget by 2015. For those that have been following the news in Canada, you know that in our budget this winter, this resulted in a $3.5 billion reprofiling of the defence budget. This was good news as far as national defence was concerned because it allows us to realign the budgets available to us to the delivery schedule of the procurements that are coming down the pipeline. These are still funds that are going to be available in delivering our capital programs. When we talk about delivering capital programs, I'm going to blow the horn of the procurement community, all three of our departments, for a few moments, because over the course of the last number of years, we have managed to do just that. The Royal Canadian Air Force has brought into service the C-17 Globemaster Strategic Airlift, C-130J Hercules, CH-47 Chinook. Our maritime helicopter program is in implementation and well underway. Fixed-wing search and rescue is still in definition. It will be delivered. We're awaiting government decisions on the replacement for our CF-18 fighter program. The Royal Canadian Navy is also undergoing a series of recapitalization projects that are the largest that we have seen in a number of decades. We're going to be receiving new Arctic and offshore patrol ships, a new joint support ship, and a replacement of our current frigates and destroyers with the new Canadian surface combatant, actually further reducing the number of hulls that are going to be in service, trying to achieve some economies of scale and effort. But our challenge, as I said before, is ensuring affordability and ensuring that we have the tools in place to deliver these capabilities. And so I'll say, just to close, a few words about the government's new defence procurement strategy. In February, the government announced that in order to better leverage our defence procurements to meet the priority of delivering economic benefit and to meet the priority of re-equipping, recapitalizing the Canadian Forces, we needed a better approach to how we were doing procurement. So a new strategy was announced which has three overarching objectives. First and foremost, to deliver the right equipment to the Canadian Armed Forces in a timely manner. This is very important to national defence. It means we will get the capabilities that we need to deliver on the government's commitments. But secondly, we realize we have to better leverage our purchases of equipment to create jobs and economic growth in Canada, and we need to streamline our current processes. Within national defence, this means a couple of things for us. First, we need to get the process of defining our requirements right. We need to be able to get out in front of industry demands for information and work with industry so that industry themselves can better position themselves to answer to our needs, to make the necessary partnerships, the necessary investments in research and development so that they're able to respond to the Canadian Armed Forces. We also have to apply additional discipline on the process to establish military requirements by making better use of internal challenge functions and third-party expertise. One of the things, though, in this strategy that's very important to keep in mind, particularly for our European colleagues, is that the principles upon which procurement is done in Canada is still a free, open, fair, and transparent process. This means that where we are looking specifically at economic value to Canada, the value added that our procurements will provide to the Canadian economy, it's a level playing field for Canadian and for international industry. All potential bidders will have to demonstrate the value added that they bring to a procurement, irrespective of their country of origin or their home headquarters. We're also, of course, going to make sure that we continue to respect all of our international trade obligations when we're moving forward with procurements. So I think that's enough from me for the time being. I will pass over the mic,
Wendy,
and I'm very happy to answer questions.
You're at the sharp end.
Yes.
You have to actually produce this with all the challenges and the rules and regulations set by Wendy. Dealing with the questions, please give us your perspective.
Yes, thank you very much, Colin. So thank you for everybody to allow me to be there and to be the industry representative. So I will try to take leverage of the what's called Rennie and Wendy said. So I think you are on the right track, and you will understand. I would just address in my speech the, I would say, the challenge and the risk that industry are facing when delivering products to the defense forces. So if I think delivering products is coming from the origin of our lives. You remember the Roman when they were saying civis pacem parabellum. So we need to deliver the right products. If we want to protect peace in the world, we need to be prepared for war. So that's the role of industry, is to provide the right products at the right time and affordable products whenever we can. That's the big challenge that industry is facing today. Delivering the right products, and you will understand, Wendy, why I fully agree about the direction that Canada is taking. This means that we need to have an ongoing dialogue with the forces, with the governments, in order to understand their needs and to understand where they would like to go. If you look at the world was changing a lot. The way we were doing war, the First World War, and now is totally different. We are not facing the same challenges, we are not using the same weapon, and so we need to be fully adaptable. That's the key challenge for industry, because the world is changing very quickly. And most of the times, if you look at the time we need to spend on developing programs, is not within 6 months we can provide a new system, a new products for the forces. It's sometimes 5 years. So we need to have this ongoing dialogue with the governments, with the forces. And I think where you are going, Wendy, is right. That means in order to address industry, you need to have this dialogue between the forces, the governments, who are most of the time paying for these products, and industry, and to ask industry what they are able to produce in a short time frame in an affordable way. Regarding the risk we are facing, most of the times is linked to the budget shrinking. Why? Because when we are discussing with the forces, we have a clear idea where we would like to go. So we are analyzing what we can do. We are working on the development process of our products. And we are guessing as well, as we are committing regarding the price of the products we are selling to the government. We know exactly, roughly, the order of magnitude, the number of products we will sell. So you can, it's very easy. It's like selling cars. You're amortizing your non-recurring cost about the cost of the price of the products you are proposing. So if the budgets are shrinking like it is today, and it is valid for Europe, it is valid as well for Canada, even for the US, you can imagine that at the end the equation is wrong. And you see in most of the media that the cost of the products are rising drastically and become quietly unaffordable. It's not only because of the industry, it's also because of sometimes of a policy of some government. And I do appreciate the comment of NATO and Rasmussen saying that you need to commit one day at the government level to spend 2% of your GDP on defense. It is very important to sustain the capabilities that industry can provide to the different forces. The other risk we are facing as well is the delay in the program. And we saw in recent years, most of our programs were delayed. Again, because of this reduction of budget that most of the governments are spending on defense. And delays is a nightmare for industry. Why? Because you have to maintain your know-how, you have to maintain the task force in order to deliver the products on time. So if you are delaying this, we are spending much more time on this project. We are keeping the same people on the same project. We couldn't get rid of them and saying, okay, we wait a bit, within 1 year you will come back on the project. We couldn't deal with that. So that's the reason why the rise of a cost of most of our products are sometimes coming from the delay. So delays is a big risk as well for industry. And last is the support we need from the governments. And I do appreciate as well the comments of Rennie and Wendy regarding the industrial base. If you want to keep the know-how within the industry, we need at the industry level to have this support from the governments, and particularly on the R&D side. Most of the new technologies you find on our products are coming from the R&D, and it is where the support of the governments are very important. Without this support, it will be very tough for industry to develop high-end technologies and also affordable products, because these products are becoming more and more complex to produce. So we are at industry level investing a lot regarding new manufacturing processes in order to reduce the time we are spending on producing these products, and the support that governments can bring to industry is huge. So more or less is that a summary about the challenge that industry. I will not bring any criticism about any governments, because it's not the right time, the right place to do that.
Pierre, before you leave the mic, two questions. Another one.
Oh yes.
Okay. In our dialogue beforehand, you had pointed out, and I think you've explained partly because of the complexity of the new projects, the in-service support has gone up significantly more than it was in the past. My question to you is, I understand that, but at the same time, you know, you buy a car now and you don't have to service it as much as the old days. And I realize planes aren't cars, so why have the in-service side gone up so much? And my second question, and this is something that you raised, is the emerging industries in countries like China and India starting to challenge. Could you say a few words about that?
Yes, I can. So regarding in-service support, for sure, the cost of the in-service support is rising compared to the previous years. It's because of the complexity of the products. Most of the times you are dealing now more with software, with hardware, and so the time people are spending on maintaining these products is a little bit higher than previously. You remember when you were driving your first car? It was easy to maintain. You were opening and you were looking at the engines, and you know exactly where the things are, and you were spending not so much time fixing your car. Now open again your car, and you will see the complexity of the engines, and you are not taking any chance to fix it by yourself. That's the same problem. So we are facing more and more challenging technologies, and for sure the cost of maintaining this product is higher. But on the other hand, we are trying to mitigate this risk for the government and for the forces, and by trying to simplify as much as we can the way to maintain it, and to have, for instance, on airplanes, I would say, health monitoring system for the plane, in order for the maintainer to be able to detect very quickly what is wrong on the airplane. So that's a kind of example. So we are reducing. On the other side, on the other way, we are addressing this cost as much as we can, but there is a cost anyway. Regarding the challenge regarding India And China, for sure, it will be a big challenge for the European industry and then for the Canadian industry or the US industry to be competitive, simply because of the labor cost. And could it be China or India? The level of the engineers as high in Europe, US, or Canada. So you can understand that we should be able to build products like you are building, and we are now close to do it. Look at the space activity of China. Nobody was thinking that one day we could reach this level so quickly. So that will be a big challenge for the European industry and for the Kenyan industry as well. So we need to be innovative in this concern in order to be ahead. Keep the industry ahead about that.
Thank you. Now, I know Rennie wants to get in on particularly on, I guess, on the in-service side.
On both items, if I may, very briefly, I fully agree with you, Pierre, that it is a challenge exporting to these other markets. But while the defense budgets within Europe, United States, Canada have all gone down, defense industries more and more rely on these exports. Now, before shooting yourself in the foot, I would say, Pierre, because when you have to export to Brazil, India, China, not even mentioning China because of defense, you will not only need to provide them with the equipment, but they will also demand technology transfer. And before you know it, they are on the same level of technology. As long as you and we are able to be one step ahead in innovation, technology-wise, we can still be on the competitive edge because customers will always demand the highest level of innovation. But if they overtake us because of their masses of people who are very good engineers, then it's going to be very difficult. The last point on the first question is also, if like 30 years ago you bought a car, and by the time it was 20 years old, you just threw it away in the scrapyard. With cars nowadays, they get software updates all the time, but it's the same with defense equipment and not just software updates. The requirements are always increasing because of the threats they are increasing, and we cannot afford to just throw away our equipment after 5 or 10 years. Most of our defense equipment stays in service for 20 to 30 years. And it also means that we have to continuously update our defense equipment, and that also is part of the O&M expenditure in the lifetime of a program. So we cannot just rule it out at all.
Before I leave you, in our conversation beforehand in the document you sent, I was quite struck by one of the numbers. You cited some numbers about all the equipment, but this is the particular one. The EU member states have about 1.5 million men and women under arms, but ability to sustain outside, I think you said 50,000. And actually the EU member states spend about half the amount on defense as the US, which we're aware of, but only reach, this is the part that really struck me, only reach 15% of the US output in terms of sustained deployments outside its borders. Now that's an issue for the alliance, and you see it in a sense in the current Ukrainian crisis, at least the perception from reading the New York Times and talking to my American colleagues is that once again, they're up front. We saw in the Libyan campaign yes, the Americans may have led from behind, but after a week, they were supplied in the ordnance because we'd run out. So you've addressed, you've raised this. Is this going to improve from a European perspective, especially now that the threat truly is on the eastern frontier?
Do you have a crystal ball for me here? No, but Lieutenant General Wolfgang was also said it, addressed it in his earlier question. It is about political will, and that's something, of course, that we have to be very careful about how to pronounce this: political will, political courage, political commitment. Yes, we are not able right now to sustain long-term operations, not only because we don't have the equipment, but also because of the will to actually go into these operations and to sustain them. And it is rather strange to see that right now, within the European Union, we've all witnessed that there are member states who say, well, maybe we need to up our defense budgets. Does that mean providing them new capabilities? Does it mean helping out in more operations? I don't know where the balance exactly is, and nobody knows, I guess. But the fact of the matter is that we cannot, and we should not, keep on going in the same way as we did in the last decade. All the defense budgets have gone down tremendously. The R&D expenditure, which is very important for industry, has gone down tremendously. And industry cannot sustain themselves by just putting in their R&D money by themselves. On the other hand, in 5 or 10 years' time, we will need those new capabilities. If I take one example, CESAR, maybe you've heard of that, the single European skies in Europe. In the future, we will have to fly not only our manned, but also our unmanned aircraft from both civil and military side in a non-segregated airspace. Now, that requires some thinking and some R&D and some work on that. We have to get our act together on that in order to make it happen. If we don't act now, and if we don't put money in it now, it will mean that we will not be able to do this in the next 10 years. That is why, on the civil side, the European Commission has put up a tremendous amount of money in order to make it work. But we cannot leave out the military part. So we have to get on board there in order to make sure that the military part of this single European skies is taken into account very well. And this not only applies to Europe, because it also applies, and I discussed it with Wendy this morning, also to Canada, because you are an integral part of our defense and security arrangement, whether it is called EU and our friends, or whether it's called NATO or in any other environment.
Thank you. Wendy, I couldn't help but reflect when you talked about one of the things you're trying to achieve is, of course, delivery on schedule. Well, I'm always an optimist, but the Auditor General and others seem to suggest that it is going to be difficult to meet some of the deadlines as set out, particularly for something which is quite close to my heart, and that, of course, is the National Shipbuilding Procurement Strategy, the provisioning not just for the Coast Guard, the AOPS and the our light combatant surface, and the supply ships. What do you really think? I realize you've under a certain cone of, but given the response, those who have looked at it independently, the Auditor General and others.
So there's actually a relatively easy answer to that one. The point of the defense procurement strategy that was announced in February, the third item, which I mentioned, is the streamlining defense procurement. And that, I'm having, apparently it's singing at me. It could be. The point of streamlining defense procurement is to address specifically schedule. The first principle of the defense procurement strategy is getting the right equipment for the Canadian Forces in a timely fashion. So one of the things that's going to happen is that because we have a fairly complex interdepartmental community which is responsible for delivering these major capital programs, is that there will be a secretariat established within the Department of Public Works which will have as its responsibility shepherding these important projects through the process and make sure that the trade-offs that are necessary, as anybody that does procurement know, there are always trade-offs between cost, capability, schedule, some cases the value proposition, the industrial benefits that have to be made even once a contract is signed, even once something is in implementation. There are obviously technologies which can be introduced which may not be feasible by the time you get to the program. What is important is that those trade-offs are made in a conscious manner by decision makers in a timely fashion. So what the Secretariat will do is where we have some of these challenging issues, we'll make sure that we have a forum where they can be aired, elevated, and decisions taken so that we can move the programs forward. I think what is absolutely clear is that there is an understanding across government, and certainly government has instructed its public servants to get on with the business of delivering these programs. So that's what we're trying to do.
Okay, now at this point we're going to move to the audience, and I'll ask the various helpers with microphones to go, because the bright lights here are such that it's hard to see who's raising their questions. But so please do raise a hand, and I'm not going to let Wendy off the hook just yet, because I'm going to say to Wendy, all right, all of these things take a length of time, more than the life of one government. How confident are you that the political will that has been discussed by both Pierre and Rennie about how vital that is there across parties? Because we have seen in the past change in governments. I think of our helicopters, for example. What efforts are you making to try and ensure that all of the four parties in our Parliament are broadly supportive of where we are?
and I'll have to disappoint you on that one, because I'm not going to speculate. It is the job of the public service to deliver the commitments that government has outlined. And so this government has made its views very clear. We have a roadmap that we're following, and we're working to deliver. We will abide by whatever the instructions are that come to follow.
I see. Oh, sorry. Those with the person with the mic already. Then, please, just if you don't mind, just saying who you are, and then address your question.
How's that?
Oh, good.
Yeah. Sorry, David Rudd from Defence Research and Development Canada. On that last point, Colin, and sorry, Wendy, I got to bring this back to you as well. We've heard a lot about the process, the new process for defense procurement. One thing I haven't heard too much about is people. Having enough people, trained folks within the project management offices in order to shepherd all these projects through. I'm wondering if that was actually a factor which caused the reprogramming of that $3 billion to later years. I mean, I believe ADM Matt actually took a hit in terms of human resources. I know for a fact that Public Works is shedding 700 jobs between 2011 and 2015. Read that somewhere. Can that not but help, but inevitably affect the timely delivery of all these projects? So yes, there's the process, absolutely, but what about the people? Secondly,
I think we're just going to give you one question, Dave, but we're going to let Wendy have a shot at that one.
I think, I'm sure it's not just a factor in Canada. I know it's with our colleagues down in the United States, and I imagine in Europe as well, that the skills required to deliver complex procurements are things which are in very short supply. As our projects get more complicated, more technologically sophisticated, managing those projects is also challenging. One thing though, and David, I would encourage you to keep in mind, and I think we all realize, it's not just about the numbers of people who deliver these projects. It's about the skills they have, the competencies they have, and it's about structuring our projects so that we're working in partnership with industry, or where we're doing cooperative projects, we're sharing the process of management sometimes with our allies and partners. If we get that piece right, we'll be a long way further ahead at figuring out what resources we need to effectively manage the program we've been given. It's the training and education part for this is absolutely key. And frankly, we lost in government a lot of the professional project management skills that we need to deliver the program we have in front of us right now. So we're trying to regain those skills.
Before I go to the next question, which is going to be right here, I'll just say to Rennie and Pierre, do you have the same problem, lack of talent that Dave raises, and trying to, what are you doing to educate and to ensure you get that talent, both in industry and from the European side? Whoever wants to take it first.
Very briefly, exactly the same problem, and it's a universal problem, I guess.
Okay. Pierre, from an industry perspective, are you paid enough?
Yes, very brief. I think it's the same. The issue you are facing, Wendy, is the same that industry could face as well when you are not supported. And that means when you don't have the funds to develop your products, you couldn't maintain the know-how within your industry.
Thank you. Question straight here.
Yes, my name is Mario Rodriguez. I am the head of the NAFTA office, the North American Free Trade Agreement office in Ottawa. And I have a question for all the participants on this panel. Mexico, well, I heard about Brazil and India and China, but I think that, and the question is, the world is moving towards a new system. It's not, Mexico has had a free trade agreement with Canada for 20 years, and with the European Union for 18 years, and defense industry is like any other industry, and the world is moving towards, instead of a trading system, to a production system by sectors, and using the supply chain as a efficient mechanism to lower costs and improve technologies. An example is the Mexican auto industry is now the major supplier of the North American auto industry. You talked about simple cars and complex cars. Well, we have the platform to build complex cars, and we are moving into aerospace. question is, why you don't see this as a potential instrument of lowering costs? And because the problem of the budget is more complex than just reducing expenditure on defense. It's a problem of growth. And it just happened to be that the defense sector was a major engine of growth in last century. And it now has become a sector like any others. I know that there are issues of...
Mario, I'm going to thank you, and we're going to go to supply chains and cost, because we've got 59 seconds left, and I want to give the panel a last
I'm
chance.
sorry, it was
Okay,
Please.
that's 20 seconds for me. That too is a global problem. In Europe, we're trying to first get our act together in making a open, honest, transparent European defense market. With that, there is a place for everybody inside, but also outside Europe. As long as industries are competitive, then they should deserve a place in that market. But the rules have to be such that everybody gets a fair chance to compete, not only on the primes level, but also, as I mentioned earlier, on the SMEs and the second and first tier levels suppliers. The whole supply base is no longer national. It is a global supply chain base. And therefore, companies from Mexico, any other country, have a right to be part of that supply chain too.
I agree completely.
Okay, Pierre, last
So
word.
just make a comment. Be careful about the supply chain. You have a commercial side and you have a different side. So I do share the view of Renee, but there is sometimes some sensitive parts of the defense products. And you look at, for instance, the States with the ITA, they are protecting their technology, because we couldn't spread this technology everywhere. So I'm not targeting Mexico, because Mexico has always been a friend, but in some regions, we must be very cautious about exporting our technology. You understand what I mean? So, but otherwise, as said, Renee, we will take leverage of the global supply chains to lower the cost of our products.
Pierre, Wendy, Renee, thank you very much. Audience, please join me in thanking our panel. As we go to coffee, I leave you with Augustine's Law number 12. It costs a lot to build bad projects. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
As you head for a coffee break, I just want to tell you that there will be 4 evaluation forms distributed on the table, so please do kindly fill them out with some suggestions and opinions of yours regarding the format and substance of this event. This would be very helpful for us in improving such events in the future. Thank you.